Hi, Ashley. You can hear us? Okay, we can't hear you.
She's muted.
Looks like you're muted.
Oh, thanks, guys. What are we talking about?
So I was just on the phone. I was saying to these guys, I was just on the phone with Cheryl for about 45 minutes, and she was saying, you know, kudos to you guys. She was saying we are really leading the university because we're so well equipped and so well trained over the past year in using technology, instructional technology. And she says she doesn't think a lot of people know that. So one thing she said was she'd like us to serve as consultants for other faculty members, but also more immediately, she really wanted us to put together something quick, like a quick and dirty list of techniques, magic tricks she used for addressing several different issues. One had to do with managing students' feelings and frustrations about working online. Two, ensuring the quality of instruction through the asynchronous environment. And three, managing synchronous and asynchronous students at the same time. I think all three of these issues we've dealt with, and most recently with the issue of frustration. But the asynchronous synchronous thing is something that I think you guys have some great tips and techniques for. So I wanted to brainstorm a little bit about how should we make this quick and easy for other faculty members across the university. Should it be a list of, you know, a top 10 things to be aware of? Should it be a quick little panopto videos from each of you, or is that too much to get together? So what's easiest to do, what's quickest to do, and what's the most effective to do?
Well, CITL already put out a couple of lists for discussion-based classes and lecture-based classes, and I don't want to step on their toes. Like, our expertise is in multilingual writers, so can we target this to online instruction that best serves them?
Sorry, I meant to say that. That's exactly what Cheryl has in mind. Thank you, though.
Okay.
Particularly because I sent her an email kind of summarizing what some of you are saying and what I'm hearing from students. Mm-hmm. One was, of course, the time zone, but also another big one was Kayla brought up the quarantining. That's something that I think nobody has thought about for international students, as well as the cultural issues I brought up. When they go back, there are different cultural perceptions and expectations with regard to time and time zones.
And online learning. And
online learning, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What are their parents going to think about, you know? So this list of quick tips and suggestions is in one respect is kind of impossible to cover everything. But in that respect, I'm sort of reaching out to you guys to say, what do you think should be on there? And how much? So if we think the purpose is to help faculty members understand and address the specific needs of international students, whether they're in the United States or elsewhere, or more precisely, multilingual English students.
Mm-hmm. Mark, I think you somewhat answered your question right now, because
yeah.
I think what Ashley is talking about is just the general tips, the general suggestions for various modes of online instruction. What you're talking about is mostly specific tips for international students, not necessarily just dealing with asynchronous learning, but more so like what are some of the cultural challenges that we expect? What are some of the challenges with the time difference that are unique for the international students, and so on. So one of the things that I was going to mention is with the freshman students this semester, I don't have a lot of students that are coming from non-Asian countries. So I don't have anybody from Europe or Latin America. So I don't know if there are a lot of international students that are going back to those countries.
Mhm.
But one thing to consider with China and probably Iran and some of the other Asian countries as well is that the time difference is 12 hours. So what it means is that if the classes run fairly early in the morning, there's no reason why they should not be joining via Zoom. So in other words, Kayla and I were talking about it earlier today too, that if the class is at 7:55 or if the class is at 9:20, there's absolutely no reason for students to not join a live session.
Mhm.
And I think that is something that a lot of instructors might not realize, thinking about, the large 12-hour difference.
Mhm. So the students would then be taking classes a little bit later at night, 9 o'clock in the evening or 7 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah, it's an inconvenience. I know that I would prefer not to take anything at 9:20 at night, but if they have the benefit of actually being in the virtual classroom as opposed to watching it later on their own time, I do think that that's a lot more effective.
Okay, yeah. Kayla, you had encountered the possible issue of students being quarantined and having to, not only the internet access quality is still uncertain, but also you had mentioned that you'd have to meet with some students at 5 o'clock in the morning. Is that something?
I don't know that I have to. I'm just trying to figure out best options of, timing and things like that, again, trying to accommodate them of saying, okay, what makes the most sense? Are they going to have other classes that they're dealing with later in the evening? So is it best to say, okay, I have availability for a one-on-one conference at 5:30. For me, that's no big deal. Like, that's when I usually am driving to Lehigh. So for me, 5:30 in the morning is not a big deal. Of course, others don't want to do that early, and that's okay. But if I'm able to meet that need for students and say, hey, I'm willing at 5:30, that way they start their day with Lehigh, at 5:30 maybe, and then later in the evening, those who, don't want to meet so early, then they have some flexibility of other times that they can meet with professors and things. But just kind of being accommodating to those possible needs. Like I said, I'm typically awake anyway, so so for me, that's just a normal day.
I was just going to add there. I think Caleb, there was a key term that you mentioned, which was flexibility. I think that's one of the things that the instructors need to be, most aware of. The need to be flexible in all of these situations, and take into account the various needs of the students. Have them be open to communication, making themselves available to speak with them if there are any type of circumstances which would interfere with them being, in class during Zoom or what have you. For example, like the example that Elena was giving, where it may be a 12-hour difference. It could be 9 p.m. in their home country if they're back there, and that may be some culturally significant time where they're expected to be with their families or whatever. I mean, I don't know, depending upon the situation that's going on over there. Even we never know if what the quarantine situation is in certain other countries that they're in. So, but just the ability to be flexible, open to communication and understanding.
Yeah, it occurs to me also that as you guys are talking, that really the effectiveness of addressing multiple people's needs and access to resources, that the traditional lockstep, everybody's being taught at the same time in the same way, is not going to work at all. That some people may be working in discussions and listening to lecture via synchronous Zoom. Other students are listening to that discussion being recorded and responding to it asynchronously. Other students might be working in pairs, synchronously or asynchronously. Certainly if you have a student in China and a student in Vietnam, for example, perhaps pairing those two up, they work on their own collaboratively and then come back and meet individually with the teacher at whatever time is convenient for everybody. So I guess what I'm saying is it seems like there's the faculty member will have to teach in different ways to different people using a different type of format to achieve the same pedagogical ends. That's kind of how I'm thinking. Do you know what I mean? For example, Antonio, you and I think, was it Elena? You two, a semester or two ago, were dealing with a classroom plus a person taking the course asynchronously, right?
Right, yeah.
What lessons, like, assuming that that is going to have to be, at least in part, done by other faculty members, what lessons did you learn from that other than don't do it?
Yeah, I think the main thing was, having that asynchronous element to it. I know from personal experience, when I did my master's overseas, and also other people that I know that also did the same thing, a lot of the courses were asynchronous. And so, having that flexibility to, submit an assignment by a certain due date, having lectures, video lectures, or links to other videos which explain lesson content in advance, and having a certain deadline by which you had to either submit a discussion post or reply to a discussion post or submit an assignment was helpful, because having to be in an actual physical session, live session, is difficult when you're talking about multiple time zones.
Yeah.
If I may add to that as well, I think the follow-up is extremely important. So it's not just setting very strict guidelines for the assignment deadlines, but also responding to those to the submissions right away. Since my class was speaking, so the majority of the assignments that Jennifer was submitting were in some kind of a speaking form. Either through Panopto or any other video responses that she was posting on the forum. So normally what I would do is I would tell her the topic for the class ahead of time, before all the other students would be involved in that, so that she could create her own response to that before the class. And this way we could watch her response in the class. So it's almost like she's a part of a discussion even though she's not there.
Yeah.
And then the crucial element to that was to actually create some kind of a response right there in class and record it. So if, let's say, the instructor is doing a Zoom session, the Zoom session can be recorded. So if the instructor shows that response from the asynchronous student during the Zoom session, and that session is later recorded, posted on the course site, the student can then see how the response was seen during the class. So this way, the student feels a little bit more like they are involved in the discussion rather than, just posting a response and getting feedback sometime later. We're not getting feedback at all. Yeah. So I would say this kind of a follow-up and this kind of making sure that the student feels like whatever responses are given are included in the general discussion. I felt like that was very important.
Okay. Oh, that's a really great idea. I like that, responding as a whole group to one or two individuals who may be later accessing the material remotely.
Yeah, yeah. I would say also the guidelines for these different activities, like how many times the student is supposed to post in a discussion forum, what is the length of the response, and so on. They need to be a lot more stricter than what you would expect in a synchronous class. Right. Again, because when you are talking to somebody face to face, or when you're talking to somebody, in a lifetime situation, it's easier to set new guidelines. It's easier to clarify the guidelines. Whereas if you expect somebody to submit a response beforehand, then obviously that student needs to be very clear on what the guidelines are. So just being very careful in how we formulate the assignments.
Yeah, yeah. Hi, Teresa. Can you hear us? I think you're muted. Can you unmute yourself? Sorry. While she's, oh,
I'm not usually muted.
this is all part of, you know, trying to work out the details. I like what Teresa has said over and over again, and maybe you guys realize this too, that part of the learning process is not just learning the content. And I wrote this out to Cheryl in one of the directives that I wrote. It's not just about learning the content of English in our case, or the content of chemistry, but it's also learning how to learn effectively and in a collegial manner online. And that's something I learned from Teresa, that working out the technological and logistical glitches is part of the learning process. And Teresa, you had said approaching this in a positive collegial manner is what's important, and modeling that for the students. Did you want to speak about that a little bit, or how you do that?
I had my first meeting this morning with them, and it was, I think this was kind of strange because it was very large. I had over 20 people on there at the time. So we had to, you know, kind of modeling that turn taking on there with them. And I started off by just being welcoming, because I think they're really nervous. And I feel like I said to you this morning in that email too, like I could see even with my own kids, like my daughter is freaking out over this. So I think they're very worried, even though, you know, you keep reassuring them, like, you know what I mean? They're worried. So one of the things I had them doing was today, we went through that debunking the myths, because I think that's pretty simple. And we talked about in the forums, we went back and forth a little bit in separate rooms on what are some of their concerns. I asked students if there were people in the class that they wanted to partner with, that they had been working with originally. So I'm trying my best to keep them grouped if I can. So I'm giving them some options. I've even given them the opportunity for their multimodal projects. I had told them I wanted a podcast or I wanted a TED Talk. And I said to them today, if they have any other creative ideas that are multimodal, let's open it up, you know, to suggestions. So I want to give them a little bit more autonomy. Some of them asked if they could make a movie instead of a podcast or a TED Talk.
Yeah.
Which I think is great. I mean, that's fine if they want to do a video or something like that. So I'm just trying to give them I don't know, just a little bit of room, some flexibility. I think on our part, I think is really important.
Yeah, that's what Antonio had brought up too, about flexibility and communication with them. But I like the idea of options.
Yeah, because we have to be, and they may come up with ideas that I wouldn't have even considered. You know, but then Cecilia, Elena, and Ashley will know her too. She's the student that came in on, remember, right before Christmas Eve. She's the one giving me a hard time. The only student giving me a hard time.
Who could have guessed?
Yeah, the only pushback. But no, but they by the end of the first Zoom session, they seemed a little bit more relaxed.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, and I like the idea of allowing them to not just have options, but have allowing them to tap into their own interests, but also their own knowledge of what technology is available and what medium or platform will best allow them to demonstrate what they have learned or what they are in the process of learning. You know, so like you said, you do photo essays, or, you know, allowing them to do a podcast, or for those that want to do an essay, they can do that too. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I'm not allowing that.
Oh, okay.
They're going multimodal, one way or the other. They're going multimodal.
Okay,
but they're going to have to. They can come up with other ideas, but they're going to have to stay in a multimodal context.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, because that's part of your course, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Another issue. Oh, please, Kayla, go ahead.
Sorry, just one quick question that is coming to mind along with this. I know this is designed for faculty, but what kind of resources have been given to the students as far as, like, are there availability of being able to still talk to counseling through any type of online method or anything to deal with the stress or frustration that they're feeling. What type of resources are available? Of course, there's the help desk, but is there any type of help desk that's more specific for the international students? Or like, you know, today I was spending time just like, okay, you're going back to your country. Do you know how to connect to the VPN? It's going to be vital that you're connected to the VPN. Like just these like notes that before they even travel. But certainly I know right now for me, it's not even the content of the class, it's just the unknown. I mean, they still don't even know what day they're traveling. They don't know if it's even safe to be going to an airport. They feel very nervous to go back to a quarantine situation, and they don't even know what that'll be like. So for me, what I've seen is just that's, you know, where I'm seeing issues. And you assume like, oh, these students, they're comfortable with technology, and they're not to the extent that we might think.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point.
So I sent in the chat, I forgot where I got this from, but it was one of the many announcements that we had. So yeah, the counseling center, they're doing on-call services, and yeah, so they've kind of amped up what they're doing, and I just put into the chat exactly, you know, it's just at this point a copy paste, so I sent it out to my 2 classes.
Okay, thank you for that. I knew there was something that went out, but I didn't know where it was or what it specifically said. But I think, Kayla, your point is really good because is really salient, because if we're talking about international students, that is non-US citizens, there is a level of stress and worry here that, you know, is added onto the regular stress, I would say, of American citizens going to Lehigh. You know, I saw that email from the student that you got, Kayla, that said, is any of this going to affect my final grade if I'm quarantined, right? I mean, that's something that could happen to a US citizen, but the level of the possibility that that would happen to an international student, in this case, going back to China for whatever reason, is much higher and much more intense, I think, at least now, at this point in the development of this health crisis.
Mark, did you want Amy to join in? She's asking me if she should join in the meeting.
No, that's okay. That's all right. Another issue that faculty members, as I understand it, are bringing up are about security. When I say security, I mean about like security of their tests and quizzes, and ensuring that students aren't cheating or somehow going around the rules and regulations for assignments in their classes. Have you guys encountered any of those issues?
I have my students submit, even if it's going to be like a video or something, they have to submit the original, like a script, and turn it in.
Okay.
So I'm still checking their citations and their sources and stuff like that. I mean, if they are getting help from a brother or a sister at home, I mean, there's not much we could do to avoid any of that, I think. But as long as like they're for online plagiarism and stuff, but let's face it, even if they were in the dorms, they could still be getting
right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, this would happen regardless. And we don't usually give in-class exams or quizzes, I don't think. Do you guys give quizzes in your class?
Yeah, I do. So I put the quiz on my course site. I figured that all out, but I mean, I'm just going to have to either say, yeah, it's open book, or it's the honor system.
Yeah, yeah.
I know CITL posted a bunch about this, and just the idea of on person's test, it's ABC and
Sorry, Kayla, you totally glitched out.
Yeah, I saw. CITL posted about the quizzes and things about how you can randomize it and how you could time it, and so you can kind of prevent some of that from happening.
Yeah,
And
Yeah.
another suggestion too is to incorporate the quizzes right in the learning material. So for example, Panopto, you can include the quiz questions right in there. And this way, it doesn't really test the level of the knowledge of the student, but at least you can see whether the student is watching the video and paying attention.
So like a comprehension check.
Yeah.
I just had class and I kind of reiterated, I said, hey, today is a shortened version of what we'll do with Zoom, but here are my expectations and I expect everybody to participate and I need to hear everybody's voice. And so I think they weren't really expecting that, but I think that it's important to keep those expectations clear. I'm sorry I'm joining you late, I was teaching.
No, that's quite all right. I kind of expected people would jump in and have to jump out. That's totally fine. So Mary, essentially, I didn't give everybody much context because I was on the phone with Cheryl for kind of a long time. And I said at the beginning that I had emailed Cheryl some suggestions for faculty, particularly about working in different time zones, because this is an issue that CITL and others, they're all doing a great job, certainly, but they don't have our insight into the international piece to it and what some of the issues that would come up for international students, like having to go back to your own country, like being quarantined, for 14 days, other cultural issues, but also more logistically, having to deal with synchronous and asynchronous students and the level of stress that international students are likely to encounter above and beyond what domestic students would be encountering. I mean, we're all under stress, but there are some issues that relate specifically to non-US citizens. So I don't know, do you have any insight that would be useful for other faculty members, just based on what you've done so far, but also in the past working with students online?
I think, you just have to be flexible. I now have a to-do list of about, 8, 9 things just for this one class, just based on their concerns. I'm just really trying to do everything I can to accommodate them. And that includes, if they're not able to Zoom at a particular time, at least checking in once a week and having a one-on-one conference. And I'm just calling them virtual office hours and, just making myself available when I would have office hours to Zoom in with a person who's, temporarily unavailable. What's really tricky is that I have 2 students from ESLP who are returning home, and that class starts at 3:00 p.m. So the 12-hour difference would be, not really a time for them that's conducive to Zooming in with their classmates. So, that would be an example of where I would have to, modify the participation points and just make sure that I'm doubling my efforts, putting everything in writing. I'm going to kind of just summarize everything we talked about in the Zoom call. Here's one that's I think really important. Part of what we're doing with Zoom is that we're answering questions that they might have about, say, the grammar forum or the work that they did in their textbook. Having an online forum so that they can ask those questions in writing. And then, what I said to them is what I will do is I'll look at what your questions are and I'll respond in writing. Please let me know if that's not enough. And then, because theoretically I could then create a Panopto video too. And I don't think Panopto should be long. I think if there's a question or two that pertain to a particular topic, you can create a Panopto video that says, this is about this, my response to Martin's question and, and G's question are going to be in this video, and here it is. And just, having a system of how you're responding and making sure that the students are all on board and understand how you're giving that feedback.
That's really useful. Thank you for that. Are there other challenges or glitches that you guys are facing that you've been successful or not successful in?
Zoom
addressing?
is awkward. I think just it's not the same as having it in class. And what I said to them, I said, first of all, I am really sorry that we're not sitting in Linderman Library right now. I said, I think what made you such an amazing group together is the dynamic and the support that you showed for each other. I said, now what we have to do is we have to keep that energy alive. And the way that I do that is having everybody participate in this Zoom meeting. So moving forward, these are my expectations. And the readings that I put on course site, I fully expect that you will have questions or something to add to that conversation so that you can participate and that we're learning as a group and not just having this, you know, because you have that inevitable student who's going to monopolize the conversation. And then it's no good for anybody. It's like this long, drudgy hour that's really useless. I said, in order to keep that energy alive and sustained, I need to hear from everybody. And so you almost have to anticipate what you're going to say at the meeting.
To
Yeah.
piggyback too on what Mary was saying about the importance of expectations for participation, if the instructors have any kind of a rubric that they gave to the students at the beginning of the course that outlines how they expect the students to participate, that rubric needs to be revised probably significantly. It has to be a lot more clear, so it's not just, you know, expressed my opinion enough during the class. It has to be like, I spoke up at least 5 times and, you know, with the check marks, kind of a specificity. So that I think is going to be one of the challenges, at least like that's what I noticed during a practice Zoom with one of my classes on Friday, that, you know, a lot of times people are hesitant to start speaking in Zoom as opposed to the class. And when you have quieter students to begin with, that's going to be an even bigger challenge for them as well. One tip for Zoom specifically, I know it doesn't really address the asynchronous conversation, but one thing in the Zoom specifically is there's reactions button on the bottom. And also if you go to participants, it opens up a chat. There's a whole series of different buttons. So like if you ask a question, yes or no, yeah, Kayla gave me thumbs up for that just now. You know, if everybody agrees with me, you can click the yes button, or if you don't understand something, you can click the no button and so on. So giving very specific instructions, okay, you know, go to your reactions and give me thumbs up if everybody is okay with this, kind of a thing. Now for the asynchronous, again, just very clear expectations in terms of how many times they're expected to participate, in what mode they're expected to participate, what is the word count, what is the length of the video, what is the type of information that needs to go in the response, and so on. So all that needs to be a lot more clear than in a face-to-face class. And also I'm personally facing the exact same challenge as Mary. Out of 3 of my students, 1 is definitely staying on campus, not on campus, but right here in Bethlehem. 1 is going back to China, and I have not heard from the 3rd one. And that's a speaking class of all things that starts at 3 p.m.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a challenge, considering that that's a class that's based on the class discussions pretty much.
Yeah.
So we'll see if I discover something else that is working. I'm going to make sure to let you know. For now, the plan is to kind of just continue with the same system that I had back in the summer, where the remote student would post a response first, and we would look at it together in Zoom, and then possibly respond to the student either in Zoom or post something additional to the forum or something.
Yeah. Okay, well, this gives me some really good ideas for a list. And as you guys were talking, I was also thinking, oh, it'd be really interesting for faculty members to watch this discussion, if you guys are okay with that. I don't know I guess I can edit Zoom, can I? I can download it and edit it a little bit.
Did you record this session? Oh,
I am recording it. Yeah, I didn't mean to record it. It automatically records for some reason, and I can't stop it.
That's a good
as
tip
long
too, though,
as
to make sure that the instructors do record it.
Yeah.
You know, whether intentionally or not.
yeah.
What's that? Say that again, Elena.
I said that's a good example as well, that the instructors do need to record their sessions to be able to post them on the course site for the students that can't be there at the time of the meeting.
I have a question. How did you get the tiles across the top, Mark? You know, with our...
I don't know. I don't
Brady
see.
Bunch.
For me, it looks like the Brady Bunch. Yeah. I don't have tiles across the top. There is, I assume there's a way to rearrange the videos. I just don't know how.
Yeah, up
I'm
in the
learning as
right-hand
I go.
corner is the a button that says full screen and gallery view, and
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Speaker
So you
view.
can either
Right.
have a tile across the top or you
Yeah.
can have the Brady Bunch view.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I just changed it. There's different. Yeah. I like the Brady Bunch view.
One more thing that I just thought about, also something really cool I just discovered in Zoom. It allows annotations when you do the screen sharing. You can annotate the screen. So that
Okay.
works really well also for asynchronous learning. If you're talking about any kind of a text, you're discussing a text, if you annotate that in Zoom, that creates some kind of a visual discussion for the students that can't be there during the Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
And another really cool tool in Zoom is the whiteboard, which is basically the same. It's an annotation tool, except that it doesn't annotate the screen. It's just like a board, like a
Yeah.
whiteboard. So you can write on it, you can draw on it.
Yeah.
You know, so that works really well as well if you're recording the Zoom session to then for the students that couldn't be there during the Zoom session to watch that.
Yeah, I just learned how to share, my screen. I haven't used groups and I haven't used the whiteboard yet, so I have to figure out that. But I think you guys have all used those.
It's pretty intuitive. It's not. I mean,
Okay.
I was able to figure out on the spot on Friday.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. Yeah.
And
I was-
also, Elena, I don't know if you were talking, making reference to after you save the video. I think there's a transcript that Zoom automatically prepares that you could share with the learners as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's fantastic.
How do you get that retroactively?
They'll
Can you?
email it.
Yeah, I think they email it to you.
Yeah, I've received the transcript too. Yeah, which is great if you want to do linguistic research, by the way.
That should definitely go on your list.
Yeah, that's a good idea. The transcript.
Oh
I'm not
man,
sure
I
if people
remember
know that.
hours transcribing for professors, just
Yeah.
unpaid graduate student labor, and now they just, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good.
Any other suggestions that should go in there? I was thinking, I'm thinking that some faculty members might be, if we show them this video or offer them some suggestions as well, that they might be thinking, oh yeah, well that's a class in the humanities. They do a lot of discussion. Which is, certainly teaching and learning can be different in different disciplines, but I'm wondering how to make it more relevant, at least on the surface, to faculty from a wide range of classroom types and disciplines, like labs, for example.
I don't think there's a one size fits all. I think
Yeah.
and I think that's true of even our courses. I had expected that my lecture today, for example, would be just to introduce them to Zoom and go over the new assignments on course site and the protocol for online learning and things like that. It ended up being, nearly 45 minutes. And that was just because they had some great questions. And, so I think for us in figuring this out, I think it's just a process of learning as you go. But I imagine, online writing conferences, a combination of Zooming and online forums, and also, a couple of recorded lectures. And I think, it's interesting, as I was thinking, as I was talking to the students, I think they're going to end up doing more writing than we would have done or might have done. And it's for different purposes, but I think it's still very valuable. And I think that it's just, they've had the first half of the semester doing it one way, and now they're learning another way.
Right, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean that we sacrifice the quality of the educational services we provide
Not at
or
all.
the possibility for students to achieve.
Not at all.
And with all honesty, I feel like the discussion part, the actual class discussion part, is the most difficult part to accomplish asynchronously. A
Yeah,
lecture can be recorded,
Yeah.
A lab, if they have to do something in the lab and they have to show the students how to use certain things. I was talking to my student about it earlier today. They can't do that. They just can't. There's no options because there are certain materials that cannot leave the lab.
Yeah.
So, you know, the students can't conduct chemical experiments in their home
Right.
or design a robot in their home. It's just,
Right.
it's just not an option.
Yeah.
But
think-
other than that, I mean, lectures can be recorded much more easily than a discussion. Or
Yeah.
if we're talking about the math course, if we're talking about any kind of an engineering where the students have to, or where the instructor has to show the students how a certain problem is being solved, all that can be recorded.
I
I'm
think,
bouncing out because I have a class.
Okay.
Okay.
No, thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
I think that a lot of faculty get kind of caught up in the minutia, and I'm guilty of this too. You know, thinking, well, how will my pop quizzes work online, and how will it work if I can't be there to proctor? What I'm going to do at the beginning of both my classes tomorrow is show them the course objectives and the syllabus and talk about ways that we can meet each of the objectives online. And
Mhm.
part of that's for me so that I don't get bound down in the minutia. And part of it's for the students, because I've been reading a lot how students kind of devalue online learning and, you know, aren't looking forward to this. So I just want to show them we're going to meet all of these objectives, although the mode may be slightly different.
And that's what I really appreciated about Teresa's article, and some of you are using it, you know, addressing from the student's perspective some myths about and worries about working online.